Hey Jordan, and welcome to Voice Notes from the Organized Homeschool. I'm so excited to have you here. Thank you so much for doing this with me, and I can't wait to have our chat. So let's just jump right in, and we'll start with you introducing yourself. So you can just share a little bit about your background, your homeschool, how long you've been homeschooling, maybe the ages of your children or grade levels, whatever you feel comfortable sharing, just to start things off, and then we'll go from there.
Hi, Erica. So my name is Jordan, and I have a little bit of a pretty extensive background, I guess. I have my bachelor's degree in early childhood education and a bachelor's in business management. So I kind of have a variety of things. This is actually my second time back in the homeschooling sector. We started homeschooling when my oldest was in kindergarten and actually sent her to public school in first grade. And then we just recently started again just this last October. So we're not new, but our current journey is new-ish. I have 4 kids. My oldest is in 5th grade this coming year. We've got 3rd grade, starting kindergarten, and then my youngest just turned 1. And so we are homeschooling 3 different grades, and the baby's just along for the ride.
All right. Hey, Jordan. Thank you for sharing that. And we definitely are going to get into starting homeschool and then going back to public school and then back to homeschool. I definitely want to get into that. But I also know more about you that you did not share. So can you brag on yourself, not just about homeschooling, but tell us some more things about you, because I know some of the things that you have to share other than having your 2 degrees are going to connect with people, and I just want to give you some time to brag on the other stuff that you have going on and of who you are, and also, fellow former teacher here, so I connect with that. But yeah, tell us about the other things you got going on first, and then let's get into this homeschooling conversation.
Okay, so bragging about myself is not my favorite thing to do. I have a lot going on. So on top of homeschooling, I actually own a bookstore in our little local town. We are in Laramie, Wyoming. Most people know the town because of the university, but it's just like a cute little college town. So I own a bookstore here. I've had the bookstore for, almost 3 years now. That started in my basement, and it was all online sales, and now it has turned into a brick and mortar in our little town, in our downtown area, which is just like a bunch of little shops where people can kind of walk around and, shop and see who's here and who's around. So we're down there. We offer everything from children's books to adult books. We do book signings and book events. We host birthday parties. So it's a whole lot of fun is what it is. I also am the president and founder of a nonprofit. The nonprofit is called 4 Angels, and we work to bring awareness to stillbirth and miscarriage. That came around because my husband and I lost 3 boys, all in the second trimester, all within a year and a half of each other. So we went through a lot of losses in a short amount of time before my now youngest was born, and we kind of turned that grief into something more meaningful. It started out with just donations to our hospital's labor and delivery unit, and we are now a 501c3. We do 2 big fundraisers a year. We offer support groups and memorial boxes for those who don't get it from our hospital. We have continued our donations up there, so we send like little board books home with the healthy babies, and we send stuffed elephants home with the families who don't get to take their babies home as part of the gift. I am also working on writing a little children's book for that just talks about the loss for families with siblings. And it was something that all of my daughters went through with us, and like I said, my oldest is in 5th grade, and so she was at an age where she really understood what was going on, and we didn't really have good resources to help her through that. And so we just took our experiences and our approaches with it all, and I put it into a children's book. So that is currently off with an illustrator and getting ready to come out. Hopefully within the next 12 months. I'm hoping sooner, but my illustrator is fantastic, and so we're working on that. Yeah, needless to say, I have a lot going on. I used to run a daycare, and so I've kind of always just been around kids and teaching, and my whole life I never actually taught in a public school setting, but we ran a preschool program where I developed the curriculums and made sure we implemented it, which is still crazy to think about that I did such a thing. And now it's turned into my kids being at home with me, the bookstore business. They come to work with me all the time, which is still so cool to me that I'm able to do that. The nonprofit is, like I said, it's starting to really pick up and bring awareness to all the things. So I kind of dibble dabble in all of it. All of it kind of has a meaning, and the reasoning for it is deeply personal to me. And so that kind of expands into, one thing happens and a lot of choices were made from that. And that's kind of how it all just started tumbling.
Okay, I'm sorry that I made you brag on yourself and tell us all the things. But I'm not sorry. I'm really glad I did, because you have a lot going on, as you said, but so much good stuff and things that people need to know about. So I'm very excited that you shared, and I will share the links to your bookstore, your nonprofit, and when your children's book is ready, I will share that too. So please let me know when that's ready. That is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful book, and also want to say so sorry for your losses, and thank you for turning that grief into something that can help others. That's a super admirable, brave, courageous, and I can't speak to if it's easy or makes the grief easier, but either way, it's just really beautiful of you, and thank you for doing that. So I just did want to say that, definitely. Okay, so you have a lot going on. Where do I want to go next? Well, let's start with your why. So paint the picture for us. Let's go back to the first time you started homeschooling. Can you explain? I think I got a little confused with the ages of your children. So right now you have a fifth grader, a third grader, a kindergarten, and a first grader, a 1-year-old, not a first grader, a kindergarten and a 1-year-old. So when you first started homeschooling, what were the ages of your children, and why did you decide to start homeschooling then? Since you'll tell us about the ages of your kids, what did your homeschool look like that first time? How long did you homeschool? Give us kind of typical day or week. What were you like as a homeschooler then, and why did you start homeschooling?
Okay, before I listen and respond to those two, I apologize. I have my associates in early childhood education. So I actually had our oldest right before I completed that and never got to do my semester of student teaching. And that was the pullback from my bachelor's. So I only have an associate's in early childhood education, a bachelor's in business management.
Ah, got it. Thank you for the clarification. My apologies. I think I said bachelor's in both, but that makes a lot of sense. I appreciate the clarification. And yeah, looking forward to continuing to chat.
That was definitely me that said bachelor's in both. That was not you. To kind of touch on that grief a little bit, it doesn't exactly make it easier, but it gives me something to pour that grief into. There's still days that are harder than others, but having it kind of have a purpose at least helps me. But it doesn't exactly take the weight of it away. And I retell my story a lot under those circumstances. So it's kind of like reliving it every time it happens. And I don't quite know how to describe that feeling because it's not enjoyable by any means, but having a purpose to put that grief towards is really, really helpful for me personally.
Okay, so homeschooling. At the time that we started the first time, my oldest, who is now in 5th grade, was in kindergarten. So it was right at the beginning of COVID. We didn't actually know if our schools here in Wyoming were going to stay open. And I had decided that at 5 years old, she did not need to be learning through a computer screen. And I didn't like the idea of sending her to school and starting that really big transition only to have it turn around and we have more transitions for her coming back home. And so she was in kindergarten. Our second born would have been 3, and the third, who is now starting kindergarten this year, would have only been 1, or just turning 1 when we started that adventure. So it feels like a whole lifetime ago. I actually found a digital curriculum. I'm going to have to double check on the name. And I printed it all out. So every week I went through and I printed out where it was. They had it separated by months, by weeks. And I just printed it out and I followed those. And I kind of supplemented with activities, going to the library and finding books on whatever subject we were or whatever topic we were working on. It was all very, very relaxed. We only did about 30 minutes of paperwork a day. The rest of it was all through interactive things. So science projects, library trips. With it being COVID, we were kind of stuck at home, but we watched some educational videos, but 99% of her learning and curriculum came from just life. We would do baking and incorporate math into it, and I was very relaxed in our approach of what we did. And I will say that's something that I still am. And Wyoming doesn't really have a lot of standards. So that first year, I actually took the time and I tracked what we learned and when we learned it and when we did school and the hours here and the hours there. And our state does not require any of that. So that is something that I no longer do. But when we first started, I put a lot of time into, like I said, printing everything off every week. We would go to the library when we could, if it was open. One of the benefits of doing that during COVID was there was a lot of virtual things going on. So a lot of our favorite children's book authors were doing free virtual events. So we would go to those. We spent a lot of time at home and a lot of time learning in ways that she wouldn't have gotten to learn in a classroom, especially during that time.
Okay, so that makes total sense. Starting during COVID makes a lot of sense. Okay, so, and I love how you were we were relaxed. We, print out the materials. I think, a lot of people were everyone was thrown into it if they had school-age children. And so it sounds like you did a good job, figuring it out and making the best of the time, using life to learn and baking and real world things. So that's awesome. I'm curious to know, can we keep going along your journey? So you were homeschooling for that kindergarten year. You had a 3-year-old and an almost 1-year-old as well. And then what happened? When did you choose to send them back to school? Why did you make that decision? And then when did you choose to come back to homeschooling, and why did you make that decision?
Okay, so typical mom life. I'm folding laundry while we talk. I actually sent her to public school in 1st grade. So it was just the very next year that she went to public schools. I made that decision, honestly, because there was a lot of pushback on me from just people I knew, some family, some not, about homeschooling her, and that it was essentially hurting her with, all of the standard homeschool arguments of how is she getting socialized and how is she eating this and that. And so she started public school in 1st grade. So that would have put my kids at 6, 4, and almost 2. And it actually went really well. I will say that the school that we did get put into from where our house was, it's a really great school. She had fantastic teachers. I adored them. So she stayed in public school. My second started kindergarten, and they stayed there until, they were in their last year there was 3rd grade and 1st grade. And then this is where it actually gets a little more complicated, a little juicy, I guess, about why we pulled. So they went to public school. My oldest went from 1st to 3rd without any problems. But our second, she started in kindergarten, and we figured out that she had some big anxiety. She would cry every day when I would send her. And the second half of the year, which starts in January, so after Christmas break, She actually lost about 10 pounds from January to May of her kindergarten year. So in 5 months, she lost 10 pounds, and she was so tiny. And, I talked to her pediatrician about it, but we all chalked it up to it was a big adjustment. She had a lot of anxiety about, like, they were in their main classroom, but to go to specials, they had to switch all these rooms. So she was constantly going to a new environment. And so we made it through the summer and we started. So this brings us to my oldest in 3rd and my second in 1st grade. So the way that it works at the school that we were at is they try and put the same teachers of the older kids to the younger kids, which I personally really loved because the school was small enough. There was only like 200 and some odd students in the entire school from kindergarten to 5th grade. And all of my oldest teachers learned my second's name. They kind of got to know her. And so I was hoping that was going to help that transition. So come 1st grade for her, she got that same teacher. It was going really well, and then all of a sudden, it was not. So that's kind of where it all started falling apart, was when our second was in 1st grade and our oldest was in 3rd. So they started talking about closing down our school, shutting the school down, moving the teachers, a lot of changes. When we kind of started digging into all of it, their reasoning was not backed well. They didn't really have substantial reasoning as to why they were doing it. It went from anything from like the district's financials to the fact that our school building was old. I mean, it was a 70-year-old school. And so when we started asking questions like, okay, if the financials are, that bad, can we please see all of these public record statements that you guys are looking at that shows what all this is like? We would ask questions, they would get upset, they wouldn't have the documents, we would push back, and then it would change to, well, the financials play a bit, but school enrollment is down, and so in order to consolidate the schools, it's going to help our numbers for XYZ reasons. And it just turned into this big thing. So we actually spent probably a year getting information. I was a pretty big spokesperson at those. I spoke at several board meetings telling them that I was against it, that the school we were at, being as small as it was really beneficial to some kids, such as my child, who does not take change well and who already has a hard enough time adapting to the school environment. To go into a bigger school that holds twice as many students, it's not going to help, and students are going to get lost. Okay, so we spent a lot of time fighting that. And like I said, I went to meetings. We spoke up against it. We worked on getting them to show all of their reasonings. And essentially everything that we brought up, to like the bigger class sizes and how hard of an adjustment it would be on the kids, and all these things that we showed, we fought like the financial statements they had with proof, and essentially they shut it down. So they gave us half of a school year to adjust for what we were doing, that they were going to consolidate these two buildings, these two schools, and close down our school building and send us over to the bigger one. There was obviously a lot of emotion around it, a lot of questioning if that was really going to be good. And we essentially decided that we were going to try. So if we fast forward to just this last school year, that's where that brings us up to. We would have had a 2nd grader and a 4th grader. We went over to the new school. We tried to adjust and we gave it time. They started school in September, and by October, our 2nd grader was home. And that turned out because we actually had, whether it was me or dad, whenever we picked her up every single day, she would see us and just break down into tears, and she would just sob. So I kind of started asking questions, right? What's going on during the day? Why are you so upset? Is something happening at school that we need to be made aware of? Her teacher said everything is fine. She does great. She interacts. She does this. I talked to the principal. He said the same thing. Come to find out, she had been eating lunch by herself out in the hallway because the loud lunchroom overwhelmed her. The lunchroom in that school echoes so bad, and they have, I think, second and third grade going to lunch together. And so there's a lot of students in there all eating lunch at once. And she got overwhelmed and asked if she could go somewhere else for lunch because she got overwhelmed in the lunchroom. They told her yes, but they stuck her in the hallway without anybody to eat. They wouldn't let her take a friend to eat with her. There was no adult that took the time to sit with her. So she was eating lunch by herself for 2 weeks before I found out. And I found out from her. So when I brought it up with the school, I basically was shut down, and the meeting I had with the principal was what started with him telling me, well, I would like for you to see what's really happening here. And I immediately stopped him and I said, are you telling me my daughter is lying to me about what's going on? And he said, well, it's just not the same. She made that choice. That was a choice that she made, and we can't be held accountable for her not wanting to sit in there. I brought up recess, where she mentioned that she had been playing by herself a lot. And he again told me that she was playing with the kids. Every time we see her, she's with the kids. So I asked, is she playing with them or is she playing near them? Because that's two very different things. And he goes, well, we obviously can't keep track and we don't know for sure. And so nobody can tell me. She also has been behind in certain subjects, such as like math, since kindergarten. And every single parent-teacher conference I've ever had, they've just told me, she's just not grasping these concepts. So when I brought that up there, thinking maybe that's why she wasn't liking school, right? Because she was getting embarrassed. Her teacher told me that she needed help, and he was doing the best that he could, which in a classroom full of 20 students, because our class sizes got bigger, I can understand how he was not at fault. I still talk to him to this day. I adore him as a person. But the principal was like, well, she needs help, but she's not far enough behind to get any help. So she's just going to have to adjust. And it was when I started getting all of those answers that I was like, okay, I don't think that this is the right move. So my second grader came home in October of last year, just 2 months after she had switched schools. She was home and we started homeschooling her first.
Okay, phew, that is a lot, and I'm sorry that you had to go through that, and I'm even more sorry that your daughter had to go through that. And hear me loud and clear, this does not make it any better, but the saddest part is that this is not a abnormal or infrequent thing that happens in our school system. The system is just broken, and you shared that you loved her teacher and you still are in contact with him, and even the principal, who it sounds like could have done a better job of handling the situation 100%, but the system is just broken. And as a former principal, I get it. Like, it is, what he said is so true, and it's the I was going to curse. It's the worst thing that, like, what he said of, we can't be sure. We can't know what every child is doing on the playground. And it's just true, and it's horrible. There are, the ratios are just messed up. There's way more kids than there are adults. And it's overwhelming for one person to be, the leader of, even if it is a small school of 400 or rather 200 children, and maybe that means there's 2 classrooms per grade or 1, and then that ends up being 10 to 12 teachers, but then there's a whole bunch of other support staff. So not only are you managing all the adults who bring their own issues, let's just be honest, even if they're amazing people, like, life happens, like, people get sick, different things just happen, and so you have to manage all that. And then you're managing all of these beautiful little people who are growing and developing and figuring stuff out. It's a lot. Like, the way that we expect
people to do this is we expect them to be superheroes. To be honest, there are a lot of superheroes out there who are doing it really well and have figured it out and are the right people. I just don't know if there's enough of those people. I was definitely not one of those people. I was thrown into the principalship and stayed for 3 years to support the school, but I know I was not the right fit. Just did not match my personality. And there's probably a lot of people in that space leading schools with like real children, we know, and people's children. And it is just, it makes me so sad. So I'm sorry that I had to go through that. And I'm glad you were able to, you know, do homeschooling with them now. And I'm also sorry that you had to not do homeschooling because of the opinions and the feedback and response from others. That's something that I hear a little bit about, but it's real that people are going to project their fears and worries on you when, you know, one, they should not, but it can be hard to not take other people's opinions into account because you know that it's coming from love, right? You know it's just because they care most of the time. You know, there's always different situations, but I just know that, you know, maybe the second time around, there was more of a reason that they could understand, or maybe you just said, you know, I have to do this for us and be courageous. And so I'm glad that you were able to get back there. And so can you share, like, what was that transition like? I know it was maybe kind of sudden, possibly, that you had to get right into homeschooling. So what did you do? What did your homeschool look like then when you first jumped back into it? And now what does it look like?
Okay, I'm hoping you can hear me. Absolutely. I will say I started having those thoughts of homeschooling my kids as soon as I started digging into things on a district level and not so much on the school themselves. And the principal when they consolidated those two schools, he actually came over from the school that we were previously enrolled in and we loved. And I can say with full confidence that my kids probably would have stayed in school had we stayed at that original school that we were in. Because over there, it was being ran really, really great. And all of their teachers, I absolutely adored all of them. We had a really great team. And when they closed down our school and we moved everybody over to the new one, it all kind of fell apart. And I don't think it worked as well as the district was hoping. And like I said, I do still talk to a lot of the teachers over there. I feel like my standpoint is a little bit different because I'm not against public schools in any way, and I do fully support our teachers. Both of my older daughters' first grade teacher, he actually was encouraging me to pull out my second grader when this whole thing went down, and that was kind of a lot of the encouragement that I needed to get her out of there and in an environment where she is now thriving. And I do not hold any of that against the principal. He 100% could have handled that better. I think what got me was he essentially was telling me that she was lying, and you know, it doesn't feel good to have your kid come home crying every day and then you address it with the adults who are supposed to be taking care of her and watching her. And not just him, but like all of the adults in that building, and all of them essentially just say that it's not their fault. So it was just a lot, and I think changing her environment was definitely for the better. And yeah, that's that pressure. I mean, I know it's something that us homeschool families hear frequently. How do you socialize them? What are they and how do they do this? And the things I did hear, it did come from a place of actual concern, but it definitely influenced my decision. Yeah, so then when my second grader came home last October, it was a little bit sudden, but I mean, it was something that my husband and I definitely talked about. And so we were prepared and she was so ready. And so I used actually the same curriculum that I used for our oldest in kindergarten, but at her grade level, where I just printed it off every week, and I just printed them off here at a local place and got them put in a spiral bind, and that's what we used. She immediately started doing all of the things that I was told that she was not able to do. So I very much believe that it was the environment and that she was under a lot of stress and was experiencing a lot of anxiety. And so her and I kind of got in a groove. So at that point here at the house, we had my second grader, my almost 5-year-old, I guess she would have been 5 that month, and then the babies. So the baby was born in May of 24, and so she was still itty bitty. Now my oldest was still in public school at this point. She was still in the new school that everybody moved over to, and so she didn't actually come home until after Christmas break. And her reasoning for wanting to come home was that she just missed being around us, she missed seeing the baby, and she really understood all of the losses with the boys, and I think it impacted her the most. So, by the time that she was ready to come home, I already had the other 3 here. There was really no reason as to why she couldn't come back. And so she came back at the beginning of January, came home, and I kind of did the same thing, except, we were so close to the end of the year. She's always kind of been ahead. I got onto Amazon, I ordered workbooks, and that's what I based off of teaching her to get us through. You might find this funny. I thought it was hilarious. When we were doing that, I hadn't gotten a chance to email her teacher and let him know what was going on. And she announced to her class that she was coming home because she wanted to sleep in. And so she was going to be homeschooled so she could sleep in the morning. And I had to explain to her teacher and her principal that that was not why she was coming home. Though I'm sure that perk was very much loved by her. So yeah, I think she just realized that, her days were a lot slower. And so from October, going from 1 kid homeschooling, 3 at home, to January, we had 2 kids homeschooling, 4 at home. We usually do our school in the morning, and we're done by lunch or just after lunch. And then they have the rest of the day to kind of just do whatever they want to do. And I'm sure we'll probably follow the same kind of thing come fall with 3 of them. It might take me a little bit longer, kind of depending on who can do independent work by themselves. That is to be determined.
Okay, I think I got it now. All of this makes a lot of sense and sounds like you guys are in a good place with everyone being home. And it is hilarious, 100%, with your daughter saying she wants to homeschool so she can sleep in. Honestly, I homeschool so I can sleep in. Like, she is a girl after my own heart. So I 100% agree with that, with what she said. And it is so funny to know that she announced it to her whole class. And she's owning it. So I love how she owned it. Okay, so this makes sense. This is what I wanted to say. My youngest was also born in May 2024. So yeah, it's been fun. He's my second. So I know you have experience with older and younger kids because you have 4, but this is the first time that I'm like, okay, well, we have someone who's walking around during our homeschool lessons now and who's trying to eat everything. So let me figure out how we're going to, keep him safe and alive while we're still homeschooling. So, okay, I hear you with your curriculum and your plan for this year. I do have a question in terms of your planning process. So you went from 1 child to 2 at home for just a little bit of last year, and you didn't use the curriculum, just mostly workbooks. But did you have a process for how you were planning for the week and for the month and whatever that looks like? What was the planning process? And then, like, a very connected question is, with everything going on, you own a bookstore, you're president of a nonprofit, plus you're homeschooling, plus caring for younger children who aren't technically homeschooling. How do you stay organized with everything that's going on?
Yes, it has been a wild ride, to say the least, to go back and forth over here. And like you said, last year, it was so quick and sudden going from, public school to homeschooling that we also didn't have a full year. And so I did not stress, especially with my oldest, about a curriculum. This year, we are keeping some of the things the same as far as what we're using. Like, we don't have a set curriculum for like language arts. I have an Evan Moore workbook, and I'm using that with the Spectrum spelling. And for like history and social studies, I have workbooks. For the kindergartner, we're going those 180 days of social studies books. So that's kind of what we're doing there. As we get older, I think they get older, I think we're going to have to look into more curriculum, especially come like middle school grades, because I mean, I can teach it, but we start touching on subjects that are outside of what I know enough to be able to teach well. And so that I'm sure will change year to year. But right now, that's what we're working with. We're going to try Math with Confidence this year. I'm hoping it will be a good fit for us. I've heard really great things. Yeah. So to answer your question on how I juggle it all, if I do not stay organized, it does not happen. I very much have to block off my days. So the days that I'm at work, I very much focus on the bookstore things. On the days that I'm home, I very much focus on home things, such as like laundry and picking up and getting things ready for the week, making bread and all of that kind of stuff. As far as school planning goes, I sit down every Sunday and I plan out everything that we're going to do for the week. Now, if we don't do it, that's fine. So let's say somebody gets sick and, we take a day off, then it's not a big deal and I can kind of keep track of where we were. But if I don't have that planned, I have learned that everything just goes off the rails and the kids don't do well and I don't do well. So I sit down and plan every Sunday. One thing I'm going to try and do this year is get up before the kids, before we plan on starting school, and kind of set out what books we have. I'm going to get tabs to kind of keep track of where we're supposed to be so the kids can just open up their books. I can open up my section of my teacher books, and then we can go that way. So then I'm not even having to find the pages that we're going to be working on. It's already going to be marked. So we don't have to try and fuss and rush and all of that stuff. I do think this year we'll probably end up doing more schoolwork at the bookstore, just because there's so many of them that I don't think I can get it all done in the morning without, putting the pedal down and getting everybody all worked up about it. So I think our schedule is going to look a little bit different this year, but a lot of planning goes into what I do. And then as far as the nonprofit things, I kind of work those throughout my day. So, if I have a minute putting the baby to sleep, I will send that quick email. I will get the board agenda typed up, and I just work on it throughout the day. But having those set schedules out, I think really, really helps me. So being able to say, on Sunday, I'm going to sit down and plan all of our schoolwork for the week, and then we know what to expect. Monday, Tuesday, while I'm at home, that is my time to make bread and get groceries, clean the house, fold the laundry that I might have neglected, and all of those things. And then, Wednesday through Saturday, those are my days at work. So while I am there, those are where I focus on inventory and events we have coming up and all of those things, to be able to really make sure that I know where my focus is. And then the nonprofit gets worked in between all of that. And then homeschooling, we have set that we start it in the morning. And if we need to take the extra stuff we don't get done to the store, then we kind of work on it there. But typically we're done by lunchtime. If we do so happen to have to take something to the bookstore to be able to finish the work, then we usually have lunch and then finish it right after. But that hasn't been the case yet. Like I said, this year might be a little bit different as we get into more extensive stuff with the 5th grade, and the fact that I'm adding a whole nother kids curriculum and teaching on top of that.
Okay, this is so good. It sounds like you have a really good planning system in place, and that you've structured your days so that you have time to knock out home things, time to get ready for homeschooling, time to focus on the business. And also that daily piece of, we're going to get everything done by lunch. And then if there's anything left over, it's not too much and you can get that done if you need to. So that all sounds so, so good. In terms of getting everything ready the day before, I just have to put a shameless plug in. I have a free resource. It's called a weekly planning checklist. But within that, I go through my daily prep method, which is like the 20 minutes I spend ideally the night before, but some nights I'm just like, I'm tired, too tired for this. And like you were saying, I'll get up early and do it. It's 20 minutes max. It could be less, but essentially it's 4 steps that spell out the word prep. The first is plan, meaning that you look back at your plans that you made for that week, review what's happening the next day or that day if you do it in the morning. Then you reset the room. So if there's any tidying up that needs to happen, putting things away, wiping down the kitchen table, whatever it is in terms of where you homeschool, just resetting the space, because for me, anyways, my environment really does impact how I feel I can function. And so I like to make sure that the space is tidy, ready to go, things from yesterday are put up, that type of thing, or from that day. Then the E stands for equip, and that's when you would do what you're saying, pull out the materials you need, put them together if you have bins or whatever that is, folders, binders, just making them in a way that's accessible for you, for your kids. That might be like moving the sticky tab to the next page, or maybe you have a sticky tab for like where they start and where they're going to end that day within workbooks, that type of thing. And then the final P stands for preview, and that's just doing one quick walkthrough of the day, look at your whole calendar, make sure you didn't miss anything, and everything is good to go. So that, like I said, is outlined in my free resource if you want to grab that. But also for anybody who's, yes, I need to start doing that too. I like to think through it as in that PREP acronym for plan, reset, equip, and preview. So good. So when it comes to, it can be an organization tool, or you could just be homeschooling in general. What's one tool or resource that you just could not live without, or that you use often, or you're telling people about often? Tell us about the tool, the resource, and how you use it, how it has helped you or your kids when it comes to that tool.
That sounds exactly like what I am attempting to add into my routine, just to make things a little bit easier. Your whole prep approach, if I'm being totally honest, it kind of sounds like what I do for laundry. I have this routine that, I put a load of laundry in every single night, and then before we go to bed, and then in the morning I get up and I move it to the dryer so I can fold it in the evening, and that way I can stay caught up on laundry as I go. And my goal is to stay that organized with school stuff this year. And like I said, I sit down on Sundays and I plan out my whole week. I'm currently in the process of designing and printing my own planner to be able to plan that out exactly like what I need, because I can't find anything that's what I want. And so your prep approach is exactly what it is that I'm trying to do. And I will say most of the time I fall asleep with the baby. And so doing it the night before probably is not realistic for me as much as I want it to be. But doing it the morning of it sets the whole day. And I'm the same way. If my environment is not clean, I cannot focus. So if I'm sitting down trying to teach, 5th grade math, and I have stuff all over the table, or if we're sitting in the living room and I have toys all over and we're tripping over things, or I can't, our table's not clean, it definitely impacts the way that I approach school, which therefore impacts the way my kids learn. I think that environment is huge. I don't know if my answer to a tool or a resource is going to be helpful, because my tool that is my go-to is just life itself. There is so much to learn by just existing and incorporating, my kids in my everyday things. So, for example, my kids and I made Kool-Aid today. The girls convinced me to buy a pack, and my measuring cup was dirty, and so we had to use a half. And so they got, a quick little, we have to do 2 of these, because if you have half of something and you put them together, it makes a whole. So if we have half a cup here and half a cup here, we put it together for a whole cup. And so teaching things like that while we're out and about and driving from one place they know back to home, I will ask them, hey guys, do you recognize where you are? If so, where do I go next to get home? And so just incorporating them and all of the things that they can learn from life itself is my greatest thing. And so, if somebody's sick and if we don't do our workbooks for the day or our school for the day, I use those days as like life learning, hey, you don't feel good. Here's something that you should know to help yourself feel better. Here are things you can do. This might come as a shock. I am a big advocate that you can learn a lot through reading, whether that is comprehension of the story to figure out what's going on, whether that is sequence building, figuring out, what happens in the beginning and how did that affect what happened in the middle and how did those two things come together to make the end, whether that is, speech, reading out loud, getting comfortable with public speaking and saying things in front of other people. There's a lot you can learn just from sitting down and reading a book, and even doing it together. My kindergartner, she cannot read. And so even just me reading to her builds compassion, it builds connection, it shows her empathy, and all these things that you can read that you can learn just from simply reading a book. And so I think that I have a friend that always says short answer long, and that's kind of what this feels like. My biggest tools are books that have nothing to do with the education that you're learning, books for fun, books for enjoyment, and life. Use life as your biggest tool and resource for teaching your kids, because there are opportunities around every single corner that can teach them something that is going to maybe help them more than what they can learn from a workbook. Yep, those are my two biggest ones, life and books.
That last sentence was a mic drop. Like, maybe, just maybe, what life has to offer can teach your children more than what the workbook has to offer. And I love how you framed it, because there's some of us, me, I'm speaking for myself completely, who are using workbooks and still feel like I need the workbook at this stage in our homeschooling. Maybe that will change, but for now, that's where I'm at. And the way you framed it, it's making me think it doesn't mean I have to give up the workbook, but it just means being open to all that's going on in life and bringing in those teachable moments from what's happening in life. And I think that requires us to be present. And I'm learning that homeschool moms do a really good job of being present. I am still working on that too. So, you have to, like your example of driving home, you can't be, daydreaming or thinking about all the things on your to-do list and ask that question. You have to be present to the fact that, okay, I'm driving home in the car with my kids. Let me engage them and be present in this moment to help them learn. So I truly appreciate that perspective. And I appreciate the short answer long. I think I got it right, maybe not. But, and also, even your answer is your answer. So great tool. Thank you for sharing those tools. So I'm curious to know, Jordan, I know we talked about some parts of getting into homeschooling that were challenging, but have you had any challenging moments from homeschooling? It can be around organization, it can be around learning, anything that comes to mind. And how did you work through that challenge? What did that look like? And, where are you currently in regards to that challenge after, being at the point where you were when it was difficult? I love to learn from you in that way.
I think one of the biggest things to remember, like you said, is being present. And you're driving home already, right? You are already in the car working on those directions, and you know where you're going. Your kids probably know where they're going. But to sit there and ask something so simple of, hey guys, do I turn left or right when I go here? The younger kids, that works on their skills of knowing their left from their right. the older kids, it starts to tie in geography and direction telling, and it is something so easy that I think it gets overlooked. But also, like you said, when we're driving home, it's not uncommon for us moms to, okay, when I get home, I got to make dinner. And when after dinner, we got to make sure this kid gets a bath. And we have this event going on. And so we got to make sure that we're there for that. And it's easy to get lost in the to-dos, but staying present is such a great way to word that for all of the little things in life that can teach your kids without you sitting down with a pencil and a paper and teaching them things. But I love the way that you said that, because it does require you to be present. And, sometimes that is way easier said than done, especially after a long day. But it's so important. And it really is some of the best ways to teach, at least my kids, that I have found, because it then doesn't feel like school. It doesn't feel like learning. They don't feel like they're required to do things. And there's some days I'll ask that question and one or all of my kids will go, yeah, Mom, we turn left. And I can kind of tell from their tone of voice that, they're not into it right at that moment either. And that's okay. And we just go back to a silent car ride. And that's not terribly bad either. But they can learn a lot through just existing in life with you. I think one of the biggest challenges that I have faced so far, and I think it's one that I think everybody can relate to, is time management. We kind of talked about my planning system earlier today, and I do have a pretty decent one down. I can set aside that time to plan our school days. I have time. I plan in that time for my laundry, because I know that that's something I get behind in. When I'm at work, I am working on work stuff. And if I am all caught up on work, it's a funny joke, I'm never caught up on work, then I can work on those little things. Like today, I spent the first probably 20 minutes of my day working on the nonprofit event that we have coming up next Saturday. And that's okay, because that is what works for me right now. But I think realizing that I can spread this out all day and my kids won't be doing 7 hours of schoolwork was one of the hardest things for me to get over, because that was one of the biggest reasons why I brought up homeschooling in the first place, was because my kids were exhausted by the end of the day. And, when you go to work for 7 hours, it feels like a lot. And you get home and you're tired and you don't want to make dinner and you don't want to do the bedtime routine and you don't want to do all these things. The kids are no different after going to school for 7 hours a day. And so one of my biggest things was not to make their school day last forever, because if it lasts forever, they're going to be exhausted too. And so I think my biggest hurdle is that time management, to say, you know what, we didn't get to math today. That's okay. We will start with math tomorrow to make sure we get that in and we know what we're working towards. Instead of pushing it in and rushing, and then everybody is, stressed out, or they don't understand, or we're then rushing to get to the bookstore, or whatever the reason. Instead of setting that environment out of stress and the need to just hurry and rush, to slow down. If you don't get to math today, it's okay. If we tried our best and we just ran out of time because we do have somewhere to be, if it can't go with us, don't stress. If it can, stop and pack it up, take it with, give us a little bit of a break, and we'll come back to it. And I think that is just me as an adult getting out of that very specific school structure, if that makes sense. You have to hit this today. You have to hit this today. You have art today. You have to go to art today. And so I think getting out of that has been one of my biggest struggles. And I find myself stuck in that struggle a little bit, but I am getting better, and having that little bit of flexibility, I think is huge. And it's also something that is very much helping my kids realize that, you know what, we didn't get to it today. It's okay. We can do it tomorrow. I don't have to panic and rush through this and not understand.
I totally feel you on the unlearning that is required when it comes to, not replicating everything about traditional public schools or just schools in general in your homeschool. I switched pretty quickly, I think, probably for the first month or so. I was trying to do every subject every day. And in Maryland, you're required to teach 8 subjects. So just picture that, 8 subjects for a kindergartner every day. It was just a lot. And it was also, there was 2 things that happened. One was like, it was a lot, but then also at the same time, I was like we'd get through one lesson like super quick. And I'm like, what do we do for the rest of the day? So I was like feeling this tension. So I realized, there was no requirement on teaching all subjects every day. It's just a requirement to teach consistently I can't remember the exact wording of the law, but basically you just have thorough and consistent instruction. Maybe thorough is the only word, but thorough instruction. So that can mean, they do a more formal art lesson every week. And then when I had my first portfolio review with our county, when I got to the art section, she was like, oh, just keep going because you showed me art through all the other subjects. So I was like, are you kidding? Not that I didn't have to teach him art, but look at that, like sometimes we just do too much and it's not necessary. And not to say that I'm only doing doing these things for the county, because like I have the bar that I have because of who I am and who I want my children to be and who my children are. So yeah, I definitely have had to unlearn a lot as well, especially because I was an educator in that system for over 13 years. And so, I was used to a lot of things, and I was thinking a lot would be similar, and there are similarities, but there are definitely a lot of differences. So I definitely feel that tension there when you talk about the time management piece. Okay, I've been asking everyone about like their biggest piece of advice for someone who wants to start homeschooling and maybe they're a little nervous, they're unsure. What advice would you give them? But I want to ask you a different piece of advice because you have a business and a nonprofit on top of homeschooling. So what would your advice be for someone who is homeschooling and wants to start a business or wants to start a nonprofit, essentially wants to add something like that to their plate? What would your biggest piece of advice be for that homeschooling mom?
You're absolutely right. And since you personally were in the public school system, you probably had a lot more habits and understanding that you kind of had to break and branch off from than say like myself, who had her kids in there and they were used to something else. And teaching every subject every day sounds crazy. Like I bought a whole art book for this year for curriculum, because that is the one thing that I will say, if I needed to outsource anything, it would probably be that, because I am not artistic in any way whatsoever. But we're not going to do it every day, right? It's not going to be something that we do every single day. And like you said, it incorporates into other things. And so if my kids are working on, let's say math, and I have them color in counting squares, like my kindergartner, she is going to not only get the math skills, she's working on fine motor skills, she's working on lines, she's working on like all of these things that are art concepts. So I think that's kind of cool that, not that you did all of that work and made sure that it was all separated and ready to go. And she was like, nope, I've already seen it. But the fact that you can incorporate that into so many other things, and it's 2 birds with 1 stone. And a lot of people stress about, being able to fit all of those in every single day. And it is not worth it. It is the one thing I tell everybody, if you have to skip math for the day per se, and then the next day you just don't do science and you make up that math, or, you spread out what you missed in math over the week instead of trying to do it all in one day, it makes a huge difference. And it really takes some of that stress off. And I think that that's huge. My biggest piece of advice is to make sure that you have a good support system. I say that because my husband is so incredibly supportive, and he travels a lot, so he's not home a lot of the time. He does a lot of overnights for his job, and so sometimes I really am doing it by myself. But I mean, he is supportive in every way he can be when he's here, and my mom is in town, and we are incredibly lucky for that. My friends that are all out of state and can't be here physically, they support me and they help, spread the word about my store and the nonprofit. And so having a good support system, even if it's just somebody to say, you are doing great, I'm so proud of you, will make a huge difference. Also have a really good idea of the understanding of your time. My two adventures got started before I started homeschooling. The nonprofit got started as soon as we lost the boys, and it's grown so much since then. So definitely account for some growth, but make sure you know your limits on what you can and cannot handle, and make sure that you have somebody who will support you with those limits and what you can't do. But just know that it's doable. You can homeschool and you can run a business and you can have a nonprofit and you can go and support all these other things, and including your kids and all of those. My oldest sometimes will help her in the register at the bookstore, and they help with some of the nonprofit events, and they help with all these things that if you include them in it, they're also learning things, and you are getting to chase your dreams also.
Yes, both of those are such good pieces of advice. I will definitely say having the support is helpful when you're juggling multiple things. And sometimes the support can be from someone who you hire, right? So I have a virtual assistant who's in the Philippines who I've been working with for maybe 3 years now. It's been a long time. So she's definitely supportive of supporting the business side. And then we actually have a babysitter who comes once a week, and that is really helpful too, because that just gives me time to knock out as much work as possible. So then the other days I don't necessarily have to be doing as much. So support can come in different forms, but I love that. That's super, super helpful. And then the time piece, and I like how you said, know where your limit is. I also would add, know your boundaries, right? Especially for you, maybe it's not as much like for me. I have clients, and scope creep is very real, where like we'll sign a contract saying, here's what we're going to do together. And then they're like, oh, can you also do this? Can you also do this? Or can you add, more hours and stuff like that? So being okay to say, nope, these are my boundaries. I can't do this. I can't do that. So for me, like, I work really hard to take most of my calls on Tuesdays. If it's like a one-off here or there on other days, I have to make sure I'm okay with that. So yeah, definitely know what your limit is, know your boundaries, and work to set those. Okay, this has been so good, Jordan. Is there anything that we didn't get to talk about that you hoped we could chat about? And then we'll wrap up.
You're absolutely right. Knowing your boundaries and knowing your limits are two of probably the most important, I guess, piece of advice I can give to somebody when wanting to start something new while homeschooling. It is totally possible. You can 100% do it. Know your schedule, know where you can fit things in, know what you're willing to do. If you're not willing to stay up late, but that's something that's going to frequently have to happen, then maybe it's not the right time to do that. You really have to look and see where you are, because it can all change very, very quickly, and you have to be, a little flexible and a little bit adaptable to be able to, I don't even know if that's a word. I might have just made that word up. To be able to add all these new things into your schedule that are going to take time. I mean, some of them don't take a lot of time, but it does take time. So I think you're absolutely right with the knowing your boundaries and being able to set those with people and what you can and cannot handle. I think we covered it all. I mean, like I said, my homeschool journey is a little untraditional. We started homeschooling at the beginning. We definitely went to public school for several years, like 3 years, I think, 3 years of public school. And then we came back due to some unfortunate circumstances with our district and adjustments that were not being made for one of my kiddos, and the other one just wanted to spend a whole bunch of time with her baby sister. And seeing as she's our little rainbow baby, I don't blame her whatsoever. So our journey is untraditional. I don't homeschool a lot of ways other people do, but I think that's the beauty of it, right? What works for us probably won't work for somebody else. Some homeschool moms can't fathom having a business and a nonprofit, and others think I'm not doing enough. So I think that it is such a beautiful journey, no matter where you're at, as far as how far into this you are, or if you've already started. And it's such a blessing to be able to homeschool your kids and get all that time with them. Yeah, I think we covered it all. I just want to say thank you. I absolutely love talking about my journey and my stories and how we went from here to there. And I will say I'm so incredibly proud of the little life that I have built with homeschooling and my business and my nonprofit. And being able to share that is huge to me. So thank you so much.
You are so welcome, and you 100% should be proud. You know, like you said, I think I made this reel one time. I was like, I know I was born in the right time because it's amazing that I can like do this and homeschool my children. And I know that this could be done at any point in history, but it's kind of becoming more and more normal. So I'm just grateful that I get to do this. And I know you are too. And everyone I'm talking to so far for the podcast feels this way, I would think. But you definitely should be proud. And I'm proud of you too. I know we're just like meeting and connecting, but I am like hearing in your voice and getting to learn about the amazing things you're doing and how you're helping so many people and your children and your family too. It's just so great. So let's end things with you letting folks know where they can find you, if there's anything you have going on upcoming. It's July when we're recording this, but it's likely that your episode will come out actually in September because there's so many I'm recording and I'm doing one a week, so I have time to edit and get the show notes and everything. I just need to pace myself. So I don't know the exact date, but it'll probably be somewhere in September. So if there's anything that you know coming up for your nonprofit or your bookstore that you want to shout out, or just let us know where we can find you so that we can keep in touch and know when things are coming up.
Yeah, I think you're so right. We live in such a cool time. You know, I've always said that I belonged in the 20s, which is so funny because there's no way I would be doing this in the 20s. So it is really cool that I am able to work and homeschool my kids and know that, you know, I'm providing them with a life that they are going to grow up to love, and also helping other people through some of their things also. So you can find the bookstore across all platforms. All of our tag mentions are going to be Blue Mountain Bookstore. We're on TikTok, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook. You can find me on TikTok personally. I will have to check my tag and let you know, because I'm not going to lie, I don't know what my handle is on that one personally. The nonprofit right now is just on Facebook. So we are under 4 Angels nonprofit, and we have not branched out to Instagram yet. I really, really want to, and kind of get out into that world also. So that's on my list of things to do. And as far as things coming up, we have a big, huge fundraiser coming up for the nonprofit in October. We're looking like, I'm sorry, my kids are trying to pick up the house right now, and it's just kind of funny to watch. We have this big fundraiser in October for the nonprofit, and that it is this big formal setting. We're going to kind of introduce us and what we do and what we offer town, and hopefully have a keynote speaker and the whole 9 yards. That's going to be here in Laramie. But we are always, 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 always asking for donations, since that's fully how we operate, is through donations and volunteers. So we can take those with cash, we can do check, we can do Venmo, all of the things as far as that goes. So I think that's the biggest things we got going on, is that big old fundraiser. The bookstore always has things going on. We are prepping for our second annual readers retreat, which will be in full swing, tickets being sold by the time this comes out. So that's pretty cool. We've got that going on. That's here in Wyoming also, in a nice little quaint town called Saratoga. Oh, Kennedy, careful, honey. And so, can you stop that, please? And so that'll be super, super, super cool there.
Awesome. Thanks, Jordan. No worries about the TikTok handle. We'll find you and link everything in the show notes so folks can find you. Again, thank you so much for sharing everything. I cannot wait for folks to hear about your story and everything you've got going on and learn from you and be inspired by you. So thank you so much. I am going to definitely keep this Voxer open. So let's stay in touch. And yeah, I can't wait to hear how the school year goes for you. Thanks again. Bye.